And good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. A major bombshell investigation reveals 9 employees at Waupun Correctional Institution, including the warden, are now facing felony charges connected to the deaths of 2 inmates.
The Dodge County Sheriff outlined several massive failures within prison walls by staff members during an hour-long press conference this afternoon. As we've reported, a total of 4 people have died at the prison since June of last year. The arrests include the former warden, 62-year-old Randall Hepp, who just announced his retirement yesterday, to correctional officers, to registered nurses. All reported to the Dodge County Jail this morning and all appeared in court this afternoon. Those charges include abuse of residents of penal facilities and misconduct in public office.
Brittany Schmidt joins us now in studio with details on how investigators connected 2 inmate deaths to the alleged actions of the prison employees. Brittany.
Jeff and Cammie, the Dodge County Sheriff Dale Schmidt didn't hold back today, saying a lack of following procedures and a lack of accountability directly led to these 2 deaths. He calls it blatant disregard for human beings. In the first death, Cameron Williams was found dead at the facility in October of 2023. The medical examiner ruled his cause of death a stroke and the manner of death natural. Sheriff Schmidt says their investigation revealed Williams had multiple medical episodes where no medical assistance was provided and no action was taken by supervisors. Schmidt says the ME determined Williams was dead 12 hours before he was discovered by staff members. In the second death, Donald Meyer was found dead at the prison in February of this year. The medical examiner ruled his cause of death dehydration and malnutrition and ruled the manner of death a homicide. Schmidt says staff members failed to feed the inmate 9 out of 12 meals over a 4-day period and did not follow hunger strike protocols. Schmidt says water was shut off in the inmate's cell numerous times for legitimate reasons, but documentation failed to reveal how long the inmate was without water. According to the sheriff, Meyer drank sewage water and his monitored cell wasn't monitored.
The decedent was in a camera-equipped cell. However, the camera was unusable for safety observation of inmates due to poor condition and no visible images could be viewed. Meaning you have somebody in a monitored cell for the purposes of making sure they're being watched and you can't watch them the way you were intended to watch them.
The sheriff called out the Department of Corrections, saying he had a conversation with the then DOC Secretary Kevin Carr, who resigned 3 days after the sheriff told him about their investigative findings. The DOC's new secretary, Jared Hoy, released a statement this afternoon saying they are cooperating with the investigation, saying more charges could be coming as 20 staff members remain under internal investigation. In the meantime, a federal investigation is underway at the request of Governor Tony Evers last June to look into a suspected smuggling ring involving prison employees. Cammie.